28 people are dead in Israel. Over 500 missiles came down in 12 days. And the weapon everyone argued about for 2 years finally showed up over Tel Aviv. Here's the version you read. Iran fired a barrage. Iron Dome held. A few got through. Tragic, but the system worked. 2 clean lines from the wire desks, and most people moved on. Nobody read the fine print. On the 18th of June, the Revolutionary Guard flew a missile called the Fattah, the one Israeli officials had spent 2 years telling you was exaggerated, the one they said they would always have an answer for. Then the answer stopped coming. By the second week of the war, roughly 1 in 6 Iranian missiles was getting through. Early on, it had been 1 in 50. That is the thing about this story. It was never really about one missile. It was about a promise, made out loud, by a government that stakes everything on being able to keep it. So here is what I am going to walk you through. The weapon itself, and why calling it hypersonic, is a fight all by itself. The night it hit a hospital in Beersheba, the number Israel does not put on a slide. And the catch buried under all of it, the part that should worry planners more than any Iranian press release. 4 layers. Stay with me, because the last one flips the whole thing. Start with the wrong picture, because almost everyone has it. When people imagine missile defense, they picture a wall. Missiles come in, the wall stops them, and a wall either holds or it doesn't. That picture is why the headlines from June read the way they did. The wall mostly held. A few got through. Story over. A wall is the wrong object. Think about a goalkeeper instead. One keeper, very good, facing 1 striker, will stop almost everything. Now put 6 strikers in the box and keep firing. The keeper is exactly as skilled as before. He just has 2 hands, and there are more shots than hands. Nothing about him got worse. The arithmetic did. That is the organizing idea for this whole war, and it fits in 4 words. It's the leak, not the shield. Israel's shield did not break. Its leak grew because the thing that stops a missile is another missile, and you only own so many of those. Here is how the leak works, in 3 steps. First, every incoming missile that matters gets 1 or 2 interceptors assigned to it. Second, interceptors are expensive and slow to build, so the stock is finite and known. Third, the attacker doesn't have to be accurate or advanced. He has to fire more than you can answer in the same 60 seconds. Saturate the keeper, and even a mediocre shot finds the net. Hold that frame because every number in this war either fits it or breaks it. Let me give you the numbers first. Start with volume. Over 12 days, from 13 to June 24, 2025, Iran fired more than 500 ballistic missiles at Israel, plus over 100 drones, not spread across a year. Compressed into under 2 weeks, often in concentrated waves timed to arrive together. That is the box crowded with strikers on purpose. Volume was the whole strategy. Now the leak itself, and this is the figure Israel does not put on a slide. Analysts tracking the interceptions, including reporting compiled by Forbes contributor Sebastian Roblin, found that in the first 2 days roughly 2% of Iranian missiles reached their targets. By the second week, that figure was closer to 16%. Same shield, run by the same crews, 8 times the leak. The defense did not learn its way to safety. It got tired. Third, what the leak actually costs. On the 19th of June, a single warhead hit the Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba, southern Israel's main hospital. It struck the surgical wing. Israeli officials said around 8 operating rooms were wrecked, and more than 240 people were hurt across the country that day. 1 warhead, 1 hospital, 1 morning. That is what 16% looks like when it lands somewhere that matters. Fourth, the weapon that turned the argument. On the 18th of June, Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced it had used the Fattah, the missile it markets as hypersonic, with a claimed top speed of Mach 13 to 15 and a range near 1,400 kilometers. The Guard called it the beginning of the end for Israel's defenses. Strip the theater away, and the claim underneath was simple. We have something you have to answer, and you're running low on answers. That's the ladder: volume, leak, cost, weapon. If this is landing, a like genuinely helps this kind of breakdown reach people the algorithm otherwise buries. So here is the answer that fits all four, the one that feels right. And for a while, I believed it too. Iran found the ceiling. Every layered defense on Earth, Israel's included, has a number it cannot exceed, the number of interceptors it can put in the air before the magazine runs dry. For years, that ceiling was theoretical, because nobody fired enough to reach it. In June, Iran fired enough. Walk it forward, and it's almost elegant. Day 1, the shield is full, crews are fresh, 2% leaks. Every day after, the stock draws down. Interceptors that took months to build are spent in seconds and can't be replaced mid-war. So the defender rations. He lets the missiles he judges will land in open ground go and saves his shots for the ones aimed at cities. Some of those judgments are wrong. The leak climbs, not because anyone failed, but because subtraction only runs one direction. And then, right as the magazine is thinnest, Iran adds the Fattah, the fast one, the one that gives the keeper less time to react and forces 2 interceptors instead of 1. If you wanted to design the worst possible thing to arrive on day 11, you would design that. This is the emotional core of it, and it's worth sitting in for a second. For an entire generation, Israelis were told the sky was handled, that the dome was the one promise that would always hold, whatever else went wrong. And in June, in real time, on their phones, they watched the promise become a spreadsheet, watched it depend on inventory. The most reassuring machine in their lives turned out to run on a number that could reach 0. That is the thesis. Iran didn't out-invent the shield, it out-counted it. It turned a question of technology into a question of arithmetic, and arithmetic doesn't negotiate. If that reframe changed how you read those June headlines, tell me in the comments. At the start of this war, was the leak 2% or 16%? The people who can answer that watched closely, and I read those. Except there's a fact that breaks the clean version, and it sits right on the word everyone fought about: hypersonic. Iran calls the Fattah hypersonic. A lot of coverage repeated it. But Western missile analysts who looked at the June flights, including the specialists at Military Watch magazine, argue that what actually flew was not a true hypersonic glide vehicle at all. It was a ballistic missile with a maneuvering re-entry warhead, a warhead that can jink on its way down. Fast and hard to hit, yes, but not the exotic physics-bending glide weapon the label implies. By their reading, the genuine glide version didn't see real combat use until well after this war. Sit with what that does to the story. If the weapon that helped crack the leak open wasn't some once-in-a-generation super missile, then the shield wasn't beaten by magic. It was beaten by a fast enough warhead bolted onto an old idea, fired in bulk. The scary version is the one where Iran built something no one can stop. The scarier version is the one where Iran didn't have to. Because a superweapon is rare and expensive and slow to copy. A maneuvering warhead on a mass-produced missile is none of those things. It's cheap, it's replicable, and Iran is not the only country that can build toward it. That's the twist under the title. The weapon Israel said it had covered didn't need to be extraordinary to get through. It needed to be numerous. If you want the follow-through as this story keeps moving, subscribe, because the magazine problem I just described is about to show up in 3 other conflicts, and I'm tracking each one. Forget the numbers for a moment. Picture the surgical floor at Soroka before dawn on the 19th, a war that runs on routine, the squeak of a gurney wheel that always sticks. A nurse who knows which light in the corridor flickers and has stopped noticing it. Coffee going cold on a counter because someone got called away. This is the quietest, most ordinary place a person can be at 6 in the morning, a room built entirely around the promise that nothing sudden happens here. That promise is the whole reason the building exists. And then the ceiling of the operating wing was simply not there anymore, and the ordinary morning ended in a way no one in that corridor got to prepare for. One warhead, one room that was supposed to be the safest in the country. Now let me make the strongest case against everything I just told you, because it deserves a real one, not a soft one. Here it is. Israel's defense didn't fail. It performed historically well. No country has ever faced this. More than 500 ballistic missiles plus drones in 12 days, and the interception rate still held somewhere around 85 to 90% across the war. A leak under saturation like that isn't a broken system. It's physics. Any shield on Earth leaks when the volume climbs high enough, and reading that leak as a scandal is just hindsight dressed up as analysis. That case is largely right, and I'll concede the biggest part of it outright. The Israeli system did not malfunction. Intercepting the overwhelming majority of a barrage that size is a genuine achievement, and anyone waving it away has never had to build one. But concede that, and the video's point gets stronger, not weaker. Because if this is what near-peak performance looks like, then the ceiling is real, even when everything works. And here's the part that turns hostile commenters thoughtful. Put yourself in Tehran's chair. You can't win a technology race against Israel and its backers. So you don't enter one. You buy volume instead of quality because volume is cheaper, and you can see the enemy's magazine has a bottom. From inside that chair, firing 500 mediocre missiles isn't desperation. It's the correct move. It's the only move that reads the arithmetic honestly. So put the two halves together because they resolve into one rule you can carry to the next story in this niche. The thesis said the shield was outnumbered. The steelman said the shield performed brilliantly. Both are true at once, and that's the whole lesson. Air defense is not a wall, and it's not magic. It's arithmetic. A shield doesn't fail when it's outsmarted. It fails when it's outnumbered. Say it shorter, and it's easier to keep. You don't beat the dome, you empty it. And empty is not a metaphor here. It's a budget line. One high-end interceptor can cost several times what the missile it kills costs to build. That gap is the entire game. The attacker spends cheap, the defender spends dear, and every exchange runs the defender's account down faster than the attacker's. Win every single engagement, and you can still lose the war because you go bankrupt in interceptors before he goes bankrupt in missiles. That's the magnitude people miss. This isn't a story about one bad morning in Beersheba. It's a story about a cost curve that bends against the side with the better technology. The richer, more advanced defender is the one the math punishes because he's the one paying more per exchange. Next time you see a headline about a shield that held, ask the only question that matters, not did it work. Ask how many shots it had left and what each one cost. Ask it out loud in the comments the next time it comes up, and watch who actually knows. Which brings us to the catch I promised in the opening, the one buried under everything else. Everyone spent the war arguing about a word. Was the Fattah really hypersonic or not? And here's where my sources genuinely split. Iran and outlets sympathetic to it say, yes, a true hypersonic weapon. Western analysts say no, a maneuvering warhead wearing a bigger name. I lean toward the analysts on the technical read. But notice what that fight did. It kept the whole conversation pointed at the wrong variable. because it does not matter. That's the reveal. Whether the Fattah was a real hypersonic or a clever fake, the leak climbed the same way, for the same reason. It climbed because there were too many missiles and not enough interceptors, and no adjective on Iran's press release changes that subtraction. The hypersonic debate was a magic trick. It kept everyone watching the exotic weapon while the actual weapon, plain volume, did the work in plain sight. And that is the part that should keep planners up at night. Not that Iran might have one unstoppable missile. That Iran or anyone can skip the unstoppable missile entirely and just bring more than your budget can answer. The frightening capability was never speed. It was the willingness to run the defender out of money, one cheap missile at a time. Israel's Shield met that in June and mostly held. The question is whether mostly, at that price, is something anyone can afford twice. Widen the lens because this outlives the June news cycle. Every layered air defense on Earth runs on the same three facts. Interceptors are finite. Interceptors cost more than the things they kill. And the attacker gets to pick the day and the volume. Iran didn't discover a loophole special to Israel. It ran a stress test that every defended country should now be reading very carefully, from Taiwan to the Gulf to Eastern Europe. So here's a prediction you can hold me to. If Israel and Iran fight another round before the end of 2026, Israel will lead with strikes aimed at launchers and stockpiles on the ground, not with some new interceptor, because you cannot buy your way out of a magazine problem in the middle of a war. If the next round instead turns on a brand new Israeli interceptor, and the breach rate falls below that opening 2%, then I've read this wrong, and I'll say so. So the real question isn't whether Israel can build a better dome. It's whether anyone can afford one. The first time a country with far more missiles than Iran decides to run the same arithmetic. So can anyone actually afford a shield like this? The honest answer is, it depends what you're defending against. Against a handful of advanced missiles, yes, the dome pays for itself. Against a flood of cheap ones, the math turns, and June was the flood. That's the rule to carry out of here. You don't beat a shield, you drain it, and drained is a budget, not a battle. Here's the marker I'll hold myself to. If Israel and Iran go again before the end of 2026, watch the opening move. Ground strikes on launchers and stockpiles means they read the magazine problem the same way. A shiny new interceptor and a leak back under 2% means I read it wrong. I'll come back and grade that either way. Subscribe so you're here when that prediction gets graded. This story is still moving, and the next round writes the answer. Next time, the case that tests all of this. Taiwan. More missiles pointed at it than Iran ever fired and a shield bought on the same arithmetic. Does the math break there too?